Somewhere in the far north of Russia, beyond any road that feels like it truly ends, there is a place where the ground was treated as both enemy and oracle. An ordinary dot on a map, until the day they decided to drill into Earth as if it were keeping something personal. On the surface, the world was still arguing about ideologies, borders, and rockets. Here, the ambition was different: to defeat an opponent that never surrendered to propaganda, never signed treaties, never feared weapons. The opponent was depth. They called it science, but there was an unseen layer of competition underneath. A hole in the ground could become a symbol. If you reach deeper, you prove your country reaches farther. And in that era, symbols were expensive. The plan was almost indecent in its simplicity. Go as deep as possible. Measure, collect, understand. Not to find gold, but to find the planet's truth, the kind that only appears when pressure starts deforming everything, even certainty. Then came the first turn of the drill bit. Not a heroic sound, but a steady, patient roar repeated for days. The kind of work that offers no applause, only wear. Earth doesn't open. It yields millimeter by millimeter. Up top, everything looked controlled. Pulleys, gauges, oil, clipped orders. But the real story was happening where no one could see, down below, where the bit touched rock that hadn't seen light for billions of years. At first, depth was a number climbing like a scoreboard. 1,000 meters, 2,000, 3. Each mark seemed to promise an ending, until they learned the bottom isn't a place, it's a process of loss, heat, and improvisation. With every section, Earth changed its mood. Harder rock demanded brutal patience. Brittle layers demanded impossible delicacy. The hole had to stand like an invisible tunnel, and any mistake became collapse, choking, an end. The drilling fluid was the project's blood. It circulated to cool, to carry cuttings, to hold pressure. Without it, the hole would be a wound that closes. With it, it was a wound kept open by human decision. There was a quiet, almost intimate pride in every person who showed up for the night shift and saw the tower cut into the sky. While the rest of the world slept, they went down. And the deeper they went, the more reality began to warp. Because depth isn't only distance, it's pressure crushing from within, temperature rising without permission, metal behaving differently, what was solid becoming a problem. Every extra meter demanded a new kind of courage. In the reports, everything was technical. But in the minds of the people drilling, there was a feeling of intrusion, as if they were crossing a forbidden door, and the planet, patient, let them pass, only to collect later. When they reached depths that had belonged only to theory, the drill met a simple truth. The Earth down there is not the Earth up here. It's hotter, more reactive, more hostile to any elegant plan. Heat was an invisible enemy. It rose as if from a fire buried at the center of the world. What should have been predictable began to exceed predictions. The rock didn't just resist. It simmered from within, demanding more fluid, more time, more money. Even so, they continued, because stopping too early would mean admitting Earth had limits that human pride could not cross. And in that time, admitting limits was almost an emotional crime, something that infected everything else. There was also the scientific promise to look into the crust like no one ever had, to understand the age of the rocks, their composition, their ancient movements. With every core sample, it was as if the planet handed over a sentence torn from a burned book. Then came an unexpected detail, almost poetic: water. Where theories imagined dry stone, they found signs of trapped moisture, as if Earth stored its breath in tiny pockets. It wasn't just data, it was humiliation for certainty. But the deeper they went, the more the hole became an organism difficult to keep alive. The drill string had to be perfect, like a spine. One flaw, and everything bent, jammed, shattered. The kind of mistake that neither forgives nor returns. There were days the drilling stopped and no one said, "It's over." They said, "Technical pause," as if the abyss obeyed bureaucratic language. But every pause was a confession. Something down there had won, for now. One of the cruelest ruptures was sound. Not the hell sound of cheap legend, but the real sound of metal under tension, vibration rising through the ground and into the chest. A sound that becomes a premonition. Things are breaking without warning. And still, with every restart, they came back with a kind of faith. Not religious, but technical. They adjusted mixtures, swapped bits, recalibrated plans. Their faith was a manual, and the manual had to be rewritten in real time. The world above kept turning, and yet that isolated point accumulated years of insistence, like layers of ice. Everyone who joined the project learned something. Drilling deep is also drilling through your own patience, until only the essential remains. In 1979, they crossed a barrier that had seemed impossible. And for a moment, the project breathed like a victorious animal. Depth was now more than a record. It was psychological territory, a place where human imagination begins to fail. But records don't guarantee stability. The deeper the hole, the more fragile it became. Like a hairline drawn on a material that doesn't want to be drawn on. Earth pressed against the walls, and the math of engineering began to get nervous. Temperature climbed into ranges that changed everything. It wasn't discomfort, it was a physical limit. Components wore faster, lubricants behaved differently, measurements grew uncertain. Heat turned the bottom into a place that devours time. Then came the first great warning. The bit got stuck. Not like a small mishap, but like an invisible hand gripping the project by the throat. A stuck bit is an expensive silence, because you don't pull depth back with brute force. To save the well, sometimes you had to accept losses. Cut, abandon sections, divert. Like a surgeon who can't recover everything and chooses what stays alive. The drilling that seemed linear became a labyrinth of painful decisions. This is where stories grow myths, and when something is too deep to be seen, people try to fill the dark with fantasy. Rumors spread. Strange sounds, screams, doors to hell. It's the human reflex in front of what it cannot control. The truth was less theatrical and more unsettling. What they heard was the planet working. Rock groaning under pressure, fluid in turbulence, metal vibrating like an exposed nerve. It's a sound that doesn't need demons to be frightening. The project kept swallowing years, and faces began to age inside it. Those who arrived young now carried wrinkles from cold and night shifts. Because drilling deep isn't only a task, it's repetition that quietly corrodes a life. And when they finally reached 12 kilometers, depth stopped being abstract. It's the height of an entire city stacked downward. A place where, if you dropped a dream, it would fall in silence for too long before it touched the end. But something crucial was happening. Temperature readings were higher than expected. Not a little higher, high enough to turn engineering into a gamble. And when science becomes a gamble, someone starts asking how much it's worth to keep going. Drilling began to demand an impossible elegance. Cool without losing stability, advance without collapsing walls, hold pressure without rupture. The well seemed to say, in physical language, that the bottom does not want to be reached. It wants to be avoided. There was also the political weight, always present, always disguised. The project had to justify its existence. It had to produce results that felt inevitable, even as the cost grew like a shadow. Depth, again, became propaganda without admitting it. Then, in 1984, they surpassed the world record. The Kola borehole was officially the deepest hole ever made by human hands. A triumph, carrying a poisonous question inside it. What do you do after you win, when winning only makes everything harder? The hole was not a tunnel for people. It was a path for instruments, for samples, for expectations. And expectations are fragile. Stretch them too far, and they snap. The project began to show signs of structural and human fatigue. Even so, there were moments of scientific beauty. Ancient rocks, microscopic structures, clues about eras when Earth was unrecognizable. The kind of discovery that never makes television, but changes what a researcher believes about the world. But the deeper it went, the more the well became a battle against extreme heat. At 12 kilometers, temperature was too high for the comfort of metal and precision. And where precision fails, the abyss gains advantage. The bottom began to feel like a sentence. Gradually, routine changed. Less enthusiasm, more containment protocols. Drilling stopped being expansion and became survival. When a project enters this phase, it's already negotiating with its own death, even if it won't admit it. The hole also demanded constant maintenance to avoid collapse. Casings, cement, reinforcements. It's ironic. The deeper you try to go, the more time you must spend simply preventing the past from falling onto your present. Then a failure happened that rewrote the project's destiny. A section of the well became unstable, and part of the path was lost. It wasn't a simple accident. It was a physical message. Earth can swallow your effort and refuse to give it back. When that happens, the psychology of the place changes. Confidence becomes technical superstition. Every noise becomes an omen. Every vibration becomes a threat. The entire site begins to operate under a tension that never shows up in reports, but shortens breath. Even so, they insisted. They redirected the drilling, deviated, tried to regain earlier depths through new routes. It's a deeply human gesture. When we lose a path, we build another to prove to ourselves we still command. The story of Kola isn't a straight line. It's a spiral of attempts. And that matters because it reveals something intimate. Depth isn't conquered, it's negotiated. Every negotiation costs metal, time, and people. The cold at the surface was constant, but down below it was the opposite, suffocating heat. That contradiction created a strange feeling, as if the site were planted between two worlds that shouldn't coexist in the same body. And while they went down, the world above began to crack. The 1990s approached with an instability that didn't come from the ground, but from streets, vaults, institutions. The project that felt eternal began to grow vulnerable to time. Even isolated, Kola wasn't immune. A hole can be deep, but it depends on fuel, parts, wages, power. And when a country begins to lose its breath, gigantic projects become questions no one wants to answer out loud. Still, there was a final surge of grandeur. One more attempt to push the record a little further, like forcing the last page of a book to finish before the light dies. In these moments, obsession shows its most honest face. Then, in 1989, they reached the number that would become almost mythical. 12,262 meters. A cut into the planet deeper than any other made by humans. Not just depth, a limit touched with fingertips, but the limit demanded an immediate price. The real temperature down there was so high it altered the behavior of rock and tools. Drilling began to feel like trying to write on paper that is catching fire. You can, for a little while. There's another cruel detail. The deeper you go, the more expensive each meter becomes. Cost doesn't grow linearly, it explodes. And when cost explodes, the question changes. It's no longer can we, but should we? And that question is always political. Little by little, the site grew quieter. Fewer trucks, fewer shifts, more idle time, the kind that kills projects. Time in which you listen to the wind and realize no one is in a hurry to go down anymore. Then came the final collapse of the world that financed that dream. With the dissolution of the Soviet Union, the structure that sustained the whole began to vanish like ice under sun. Science needs continuity. History rarely provides it. It wasn't a dramatic shutdown with explosions or shouted orders. It was worse, an administrative death made of delays, cuts, and missing parts. A project can survive technical failures. It rarely survives being forgotten. There were still attempts to continue under new structures, new promises, but the whole had already shown its teeth. Heat, instability, cost. The bottom was no longer a romantic frontier. It was a technical debt, and debts are heavy. When people ask, why did they stop? Many expect a single reason, one sentence. But the truth is a bundle of reasons tightening together. Excessive heat, recurring failures, broken funding, evaporated priority. It wasn't the planet that said no, it was the world. Kola then became a strange object, something that exists and doesn't. A locked point, a covered scar. The surface was sealed, as if they wanted to erase the temptation to look. As if curiosity were too dangerous to leave accessible. And here's the irony. The deepest hole in the world doesn't look like anything grand. It isn't a portal, it isn't a crater. It's discreet. And maybe that's the most disturbing part, because it suggests the biggest human acts sometimes end without witnesses. Even sealed, the hole remains like a trapped thought. A reminder that we can touch the extreme, but we can't sustain the extreme. In the end, depth wasn't defeated. It was only visited, briefly. There is also the real scientific legacy. Samples, measurements, revised hypotheses. The discovery that the crust is more complex, wetter, hotter than simplifications allowed. The whole didn't deliver treasures. It delivered corrections. And corrections changed the future. But the public prefers myths, because myths are easier to carry than truth. The truth that nothing mystical was found, only the brute force of geology. And even so, that force is almost spiritual, because it reduces our vanity to dust. If you could descend through that well, you'd feel something beyond fear. You'd feel a kind of cosmic humiliation, realizing Earth is not the stage for our story, but the protagonist. We merely scratched it and called that conquest. And here, the silence grows heavier, because after everything, the hole is still there, sealed like a secret no one wants to reopen. Not for fear of monsters, but for fear of what it reminds us. Our era's end, and Earth remains. The story of Kola is the story of a question that grew too big. How far can we go? And when the answer came, it didn't come in words. It came in heat, in stuck metal, in broken budgets, in abandonment. The answer was, as far as we can sustain. Because stopping wasn't an act of cowardice, it was an act of reality. And reality sometimes hurts most in a civilization that learned to measure greatness by records. Kola reminds us that records are also scars. Today, the place lives online as legend and on shelves as science. But on the ground, it lives as absence. A sealed hole is a symbolic gesture. It says curiosity has borders imposed not by morality, but by the cost of existing. And still, even sealed, it pulls at the mind. Because the idea of depth is a mirror. The longer you look, the more you realize how little you understand. Maybe that's why they stopped. Not because they couldn't go on forever, but because they would keep wanting to. The deepest hole ever drilled didn't end with a final discovery, but with a human decision. And human decisions always reveal more about us than about the world. In the end, Kola isn't a story about a hole. It's a story about limits, because the planet doesn't need us to understand it in order to continue. We need understanding to bear the idea that we're temporary. And maybe the most frightening depth isn't the wells, but the depth of our need to prove something.